Woof, woof, woof. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Parallel Barkings. My name is Larry Becker, and I'm here with my smaller version of myself, Ariana. Introduce yourself.
It's I'm Ariana. You did it for me. Thank you.
Well, I think there's more to you than that.
Oh, yes. I appreciate
There is.
that.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about something that's actually both tragic and infuriating and difficult in every kind of way. And it's a long story, but it's the current iteration. On May 24th, 2022, 18-year-old Salvador Rolando Ramos fatally shot 19 students and 2 teachers and wounded 17 other people at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. This came after he shot his grandmother in the forehead, severely wounding her. The repercussions have been immediate and substantial, going to everything from who eventually wound up having to meet the threat posed by Mr. Ramos, the actions, or rather the inactions of the local police, the fitting in of this within the larger narratives of guns, gun control, gun violence, and the even larger narratives of the way in which we either fail or seek to protect our children. There's all kinds of issues. Many of these things, of course, are still unraveling as we talk about it today. And so this is kind of a preliminary talk. We know what little we know. And the biggest thing we know is the tragedy of 19 little ones and 2 quite heroic teachers who gave up their lives because of the actions of an 18-year-old and his ability to both get and choose to use a significantly enhanced weapon, as I understand it, to engage in acts of senseless, in the sense that he had nothing, at least as far as I know, nothing personally connecting him to his victims, a senseless act of violence in which he ultimately was killed. So, Ariana.
Yes.
Well, what do you think? What do you have to say? And that's actually very interesting, because a lot of Americans kind of feel the same way. That long sigh that you heard is kind of not a shrugging of the shoulders, but an exasperated and kind of frustrated sigh. We've been here so often under a variety of different circumstances that it's, you kind of pick yourself up and you go, well, here we go again. Although the circumstances are all different in every one of these cases, at least at the margins, the thing that holds them together are young people, usually males, as far as we can tell, young people who themselves have their own stories, which does not excuse what they did, but who have their own stories, which then get connected with, fused with guns, gun cultures and narratives. And then they wind up in usually, but not always, in schools, sometimes in movie theaters, sometimes in other places. And then that becomes part of the fabric of other people, maybe not so young, who also will use guns, but not always guns, right? Sometimes knives. Cars were used for a while, and then they stopped being used very much, although that can always come back. Knives are still being used, and just so this complex.
But guns are very particular because they have a specific.
They can kill a whole lot more people faster.
Right.
And they're easier to port around than a machete or an SUV.
Well, and it's harder to get, I feel like it's harder to get legislation.
So the immediate response,
guns because of
right,
how people
legislation.
read
Okay,
the Constitution.
legislation. And what do you mean by legislation? By legislation, you mean the state coming in and legislating, in this case, would come in a variety of different stripes. And indeed, what we're likely to see is some legislation. And I imagine at this point, the Republicans would be, or the conservatives, or the Democrats as well, because there are some who are reluctant to significantly reduce access to weapons by the population, which is a large population that is not inclined to engage in these really horrible acts. But there'll be some legislation, but from at the one end of the spectrum is no one gets guns, right? At the other end of the spectrum, we don't care who gets guns, right? And that's been the traditional American spectrum. So when you talk about legislation, what kind of legislation or within that spectrum, what legislation are you talking about?
I'm talking about more accountability regarding the ability to track who is purchasing a dangerous weapon. Yeah, if you're willing to purchase that kind of item, then you should be willing to give up some sort of privacy.
Oh, so they should have, now, what are you talking about? Like a microchip
No, not at
on
all.
everyone who owns a
You
weapon?
just have your name in some sort of registry that, yep, you purchased this on this day.
But we do that. I mean, when you legally purchase a gun in many states, you are to register both.
I guess what I'm asking for is a federally accessible, not just state by state.
You want a master registry of guns?
Yes.
Okay. But what will a registry get you? Because
but that's not it. That's just one among many things. I don't think one legislative piece will do the job. And I think, for instance, there are only a few states with assault weapons. I mean, bans, but even assault weapons, even if there are, what my question is, why are people needing assault weapons first? Like, why you need that? I mean, I guess it's none of my business, but it is kind of my business. Like, you want to you want to do what with an assault weapon?
It's like using dynamite to go fishing.
Yeah, there's really no good reason that you would be needing an assault weapon.
And by good, all right, and it's for the state to decide what is good or not good. Or is it for the federal government to decide?
I guess for our democratic republic, we have decided to elect officials to legislate for us and decide what is and is not.
Well, except we've also included in our Constitution a healthy disrespect and distrust for the state. This is not to suggest that we couldn't have it or not.
This is what happens when we have no regulation. We let it run wild.
But that's a conundrum here, and we're hoist on our own. We're hoist on our own conceptual matrix that holds us together.
So then what's your solution? I don't want to hear your.
Oh God, I wish I had a solution. I'd be a millionaire.
All you have
but I started out by saying, I started out by saying that in fact, what we have are tragedies built on tragedies in an ecology of tragedies within a system that is now built in a way that solution is difficult because you have to insert a solution within a complex matrix of things that sometimes are both paradoxical and self-contradictory. And that's what makes it so devilishly difficult. even among, let's say 95, because there's always some crazy 5%, 95 of us who believe we really should be doing something to, you can't prevent crazy, but at least to so substantially minimize the possibility, and then to create systems that quickly reduce its effect. You want a system like that so that we don't have to worry anymore, or we don't have to worry as much every time we send our kids to school, or we decide to go to the theater or a restaurant or stroll down the street, right? And we wind up with 95% of the people saying, look, I would really like to live in a republic where I don't have to think twice about going to a movie theater, or think twice about sending my kid to school, or think twice about going to a farmer's market, right? Or to think twice about going to a 4th of July celebration in some open grassy area where a road's by.
Where I don't feel like a wild animal who is being hunted, but
Right. And, and need I remind you, right, and I don't have to, that these things, the kids are particularly tragic, but it wasn't all that long ago that we had that crazy guy at the Mandalay, who went to what was it, some kind of open air thing, and shot up a bunch of people. Another tragedy there wasn't a school, but basically you had people who were in a confined space, and was very easy to shoot them, and he
this
did
is
it.
also what's making it frustrating. It's happening so frequently.
Right. And so now you've got two problems. You've got, one is the structural problem. What kind of structure, legal, social, cultural, can you put in? That is, rules. The second problem is, what kind of thing can we do to change people so that they understand right and wrong? And the problem is, most everyone understands right and wrong, but it's usually this very small group of outliers, right, who don't, right? So you've got, re-preaching to the 99% of us who've already
Not gonna
bought
work.
this,
That's not gonna do
well, it's going to reinforce what we already strongly feel. So that may not work all that much. Legislation that would absolutely get rid of weapons will get rid of everyone's weapons other than the criminal weapons. It's very much like, to some extent, the parallel that just screams out at you is, well, let's suppress all drugs. And what we've done is then create these taboo markets. And so the only people who have it are criminals. And then that creates all kinds of other problems. But in the Uvalde case, which I thought was really quite interesting, the failure wasn't just the failure of being able, like you said, and your idea is actually quite good, of tracking and of better choices in who has the capacity to own a gun. The United States, like most common law countries, is built on the notion that people who are fully capacitated have all kinds of rights and responsibilities within society, but the society has the right to decide that you don't have the capacity, and therefore to limit your access to things. So children up to 21 are viewed as being of not having the capacity to decide whether or not to drink, right? People and people who have certain mental conditions can be deemed by the courts not to have capacity, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have that notion. It's not that hard to bring the notion of capacity and incapacity more vigorously into the licensing sphere, as well as your monitoring and surveillance, which is a necessary, probably part of life, especially when you're dealing with having as you suggest, quite rightly, having a weapon that can kill. The price of that may be a more willingness to expose yourself to some scrutiny. And then we can debate about what that is. And all of that is right. But in the Uvalde case, more than I think in a lot of other cases, just nakedly exposed, is not the structural or legal side, but the implementation side. The cops sat around and they did, and at least this is the current story, and I don't know where it will ultimately go, so these are all the caveats, but the cops worked very hard to blow every possible opportunity they had to mitigate and prevent. And it was ultimately not the traditional forces that ultimately saved the day, but someone literally from left field, right? And so then you have to ask yourself, it isn't enough here to work on people, and it isn't enough to piously write or rewrite text, whether at the federal level or the state level. A vigorous program of reasonable and effective enforcement also has to be part of this as well. And here we're not talking about police overreaction. We've had plenty of that, and that has produced its own tragedy, but we haven't really gotten that right either. And the Uvalde case is a very nice example, I think, of what that means. And ironically enough, you see it not just in that context, but the day after Uvalde, it's just been reported, and you and I talked about this before we went on the air, another person with an AK had gone to a graduation in West Virginia, and but for the quick thinking of a woman with a licensed pistol who shot him after he began shooting, right? There would have been a death toll in that case. And so even
But I'm still thinking, why are we allowing the purchase of AKs in the first place? There's no reason you need to be killing anything in a matter of milliseconds. There's no reason.
And that's a discussion that we've had, what, for 30 years? I'm sympathetic. I'm sympathetic. Look, even at the mildest level, one could argue that the more destructive a weapon is, even if you're like a complete Second Amendment person, the more destructive a weapon is, the more rigorous the process for licensing ought to be.
You are allowed to have it.
Right,
go do whatever you have to do to go get your freaking weapon.
But therefore, the licensing for a 9mm should not be the same as the licensing for a submachine gun.
Yes, absolutely.
But I don't think that there's been much effort to do that. And part of it may be it's an administrative nightmare. And the reason in part it's an administrative nightmare is that the state neither has the capacity nor the will to actually do this. And what has been done.
No.
But this is
no, I know.
Because what has been done is that Congress is very, and state legislatures are very eager to wrap themselves in virtue by saying, yeah, we're going to write some words and sign our names to it.
Absolutely.
Oh, but the state isn't going to enforce and implement this nor be liable for mess ups. What we're going to do is delegate all of this to gun sellers and or retailers and or manufacturers.
And then if you don't,
they're going to have to figure out,
you are criminally responsible.
Very much guidance, right? Without very much guidance, they're going to have to figure out what to do. And then we can sit in our ivory tower and say, well, you didn't do your job. We didn't tell you what your job was. What we did was effectively governmentalize you without your consent, by the way, but we've governmentalized you by imposing effectively the responsibilities and operations of an administrative apparatus onto a private company, right? Which with none of the protections that citizens have against administrative abuse and the like. We're going to do that. We're going to give you fairly little guidance. And then on top of everything else, when you screw up, we're going to say it's your fault, it's not my fault. And we're going to find someone else to blame. So part of what's going on here is not only is the problem intractable, or complicated, but also there seems to be there's an added complexity because of the way in which regulation and the devolution of regulatory authority, it's not just here, it's virtually everywhere, has complicated, again, the issue. And then when you layer on top of that, law enforcement that either goes way overboard in one way, and we saw that, for example, with George Floyd and police overuse of force in in a budget context, to the other side, which is Uvalde, where it was, oh, well, maybe we should
Should we think about going over?
yeah. So that's where we are. So I think everyone's gut is, or many people's reasonable gut is, that indeed we really have to figure out a way of managing this, even if you believe that people ought to have, to some greater or lesser extent, some access to firearms.
Yeah.
But beyond that, the issue then becomes, because that's just, as we've seen here, a slice and not the entirety of the issue that this extraordinary tragedy suggests, much less the trigger that we have with these killers. Because if you take their guns away, you'll make them less efficient killers, but are you going to stop making them kill?
Yeah, I want to know what is what is the nascence of this desire to kill everyone, and why is it directing them to these places of innocence, I guess.
Right.
Is it
Exactly. No, and you hit the nail on the head. And that is really the most extraordinary and to some extent horribly tragic part of this thing, right? Why are they drawn to places of, especially in the case of school kids, and especially in this case, elementary school kids, to places where you can't get much more innocent than this?
Yeah, innocent, or just joy, or just, like movie theaters, just where you're
right. And and
light.
there's a lot of quote unquote studies. It's not clear that we know yet, and it's not clear that even if we knew, there's ways with 350 million people that, short of sticking a monitor in us and then developing ironclad rules about deviance and then punishing people, right? We're going to go one step closer to, what was that Minority Report where you do the predictive analytics?
Oh no, that movie, no.
Well, but that would be the tendency, because
You mean you arrest the criminal before the crime is committed.
Right, on the basis of a propensity, or you don't even arrest them. What you may do is send them preventively to re-education camps.
Yeah, which is ridiculous, but I mean,
But
what
not,
I think,
but not
not quite, not so far off. It would be nice to
not implausible, and we should all be worried, because all of these things are subject to extraordinary abuse.
Exactly. That, yeah, and we should all be worried about abuse in any direction.
Right. For all of that, this tragedy is just, it's I suspect that it will, a friend of ours suggested that this is potentially one of those pivotal events that may actually get society to move, right, to overcome a little bit inertia in one way or another. And I suspect that that person is right. There'll be something. The question is, given the interconnected complexity of the things that make up this something, whether it's going to be electioneering, window dressing, or whether it will actually be effective, because generally the easy solution tends to be the solution that will be least effective, except to aid someone's reelection campaign, or to enhance some bureaucrat's budget. And that's not, I think, this tragedy is just too big and too hurtful. That's not really what we should be aiming for anymore. I don't think that it's a great idea to use this tragedy to reward politicians who grandstand, or to reward bureaucrats who are looking for bigger budgets, or to reward police departments who are looking for greater armaments or greater discretion to shoot people. I think that would be the wrong thing to do here. But what the right thing is may require, because we're running out of time, that may require another podcast.
Yes.
And if you all have ideas or thoughts, please send them to us. We are as stunned probably and as shocked as everyone else in this country. And it's not clear. That's what we were doing, a lot of hemming and hawing. It's not clear if you're really thoughtful about this, what can actually solve the problem instead of just making you feel good. Because this isn't a matter of making us feel good, it's a matter of solving a problem. But I'll leave you with that. Last thoughts, Little Wolf.
I guess beyond legislation, if that's not going to happen, I guess it would be good to see a better trained response and better solutions to this kind of emergency. If this is the new normal that everybody is planning for, then I want to see what.
Yeah, well, as a parent, my my only response is, if this is a new normal and I'm going to have to bear the risk of your incompetence, what you're suggesting to me is maybe I should seriously consider homeschooling my kids.
Right, exactly. So, ta-da! Bark,
Woof,
bark.
woof. Woof, woof. All right. Stay tuned for the next one. Again, if you've got thoughts, comments, reactions, please send them to us. We'd be delighted to hear from you. If you've got ideas for future podcasts, let us know. Until then, woof, woof, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks everyone.